Well, we are back with some Bleach Soul Resonance, and we're going to be taking a look at the actual total amount of Jade that we've been able to acquire since Aizen's banner has come and gone. You can see right here that I had 10,738 Jade the moment I stopped pulling for Aizen. This was my final pull. You can see 2 out of 40, meaning I did get his weapon. I in total spent about 40 to 50 pulls on his actual banner, so almost half a pity, about half a pity, maybe a little more, possibly exactly. And I think this was about 30 pulls on weapon, I think. So about 70 pulls in total, give or take. And that led to somewhere in the ballpark of spending down my 9,000, almost, 20,000 of my taking almost 9,000 out of my 20,000 Jade, given that we also had a bunch of tickets, and given that I was also using the shop to get myself tickets as well, because you should be bouncing between the shop and spending Jade and the shop and spending Jade, so on and so forth. Let's go to the next thing real quick just to confirm. And here we are on the actual game screen. Here we have 19,804 total Jade, as well as 11 limited gacha tickets, which I have not spent at all. Let's just continue to let's do some quick math there. That means we have 9,066 Jade in total that we earned purely from playing the game. I think that should be right, but someone can correct me otherwise, right? The reason this is sort of significant is because we do actually have the complete confirmation of the next character that is coming to Bleach Soul Resonance, which is Gin, as most people expected. Thankfully, with the new schedule being the 3-week grace period, we are able to sort of account for, these delayed reveals and the like. But something more that I want to talk about is saving, because most people aren't like super hype on Gin, right? And that means that we sort of can cut a balance here, because even though, we now have an extra week, which means unless they change the reward system, we're getting a lot of rewards, which means you can start looking at getting dupe 1s of character, dupe 2 of character and their weapon. If you really don't like the next swing of characters, like say you're just not a Nell fan, say you're just not a Soifon fan or a Grimmjow fan or what have you, you could say that, well, I know I'm skipping all 3 of those, so I'm gonna dupe out my Aizen as best I can. Like, you can start really making some decisions. The thing is, with those decisions, we can sort of start looking at how they affect the actual teams, right? So let's pause and go over there. So first and foremost, we have that Gin, the SSR, is releasing soon. It's now 100% confirmed that he is next. So as far as who is coming, there is now no more debate. He has been revealed, available on January 9th. The 9th is the date we knew we were getting something. And like I said, it's not that you shouldn't listen to leaks, it's that you should listen to leaks with some skepticism, because for all we know, Gin could drop and he's a slash character, right? He's not going to be, because the leaks sort of lead us to a certain way, but it just is one of those things that could be a possibility, right? We truly never know, because they could do whatever they want. As far as who is after him, and again, we'll have some, we'll be able to position around this. It's not like, oh my god, you need to rush to do this, rush to do that. Remember that if you're halfway in on Gin and you have Ikkaku, you can wait. Let people use him. Let people see how good he is. If you had to pity Aizen, if you had to pity his weapon, you're just getting, railed on summons. Just wait. Just wait and, let people see how, quote unquote, viable and necessary this character is. I do think that if the leaks are correct, then Gin looks incredibly powerful, much stronger than most other DPS in the game, aside from characters like top-end Aizen's and Bankai Ichigo, obviously. That said, we can sort of get into, like, the next character after Gin is likely from this list. This was from the 30th, posted by someone who posts leaks in the Bleach Soul Resonance Discord. And we can see that Kenpachi, Mayuri, Grimmjow, Nadel, and Soifun are the characters that are in game files, but not confirmed, right? We know these characters are sort of around. One thing in particular is that Grimmjow and I think Nell both have their boundary art already in game, which means that, and this is information that I'm taking from the Discord as well as people like Giku in his videos, these are characters that are more complete, they're more whole, which means they're easier to just flatly put into the game if, you know, if we're taking that as law. I will say that Kenpachi makes a lot of sense coming next, just because even though it would be kind of messed up, it would be wise of them to think about power creeping a character like Bankai Ichigo, because it creates sort of a power vacuum that you have to like respond with, as well as him just being really hype, right? So you essentially get people who didn't reroll, you know, paying for Ichigo, and then you get people who maybe didn't get Ichigo paying for Kenpachi. It is sort of like it's a unique situation. As far as what the teams actually need, because I think that is a greater point to make, is like, what do these teams actually need? We're gonna go in game and talk about it. Just thinking about like Kenpachi, Mayuri, Grimmjow, Soifun, and Nell as the options. Let's go back into game here. Let's see, will this work? This does work. Okay. So right now, and actually let's go into a trial, and we'll go into supplies, and then we'll go to challenge, and we'll just look at my teams. So I've been using this team as just my power team. A 30,000 power Aizen, a nearly 40,000 power Yoruichi, and a Kisuke Urahara who is nearly 30,000 himself. The reason I consider this like our power team, you can see my other teams sort of organized by color, is because these are just like the flat highest power characters I have, who are always doing the most damage, who are sort of out utilitying my other characters because they're just like strong, right? They have more utility, they're more synergistic because they're just giving flat bonuses that are very powerful while also having my best gear, right? But once we get into like things like Fest and Tower and blah blah blah, we can start looking that I have orange team, red team, yellow team, blue team. Which of these teams looks awful? I mean, it's no surprise that it's this one. The reason that I could see this being the next up, and Giku brought this up in his video, so I want to give credit to that, is, again, we don't know what the character elements will be. What we do know is that the strike characters seem to be a bit unorthodox. We have characters like Yoruichi, who is, a strike character. She is literally punching and kicking you. We also have characters like Nemu, who, is punching and kicking you. But we then have characters like Sajin Komomura, who is a strike character, but what does strike mean for him? It means that he's sort of this blunt forced, brutal, you know, beatdown character, right? I would say that even though Grimmjow leans towards being like a sort of a slash character in people's mind, maybe you expect him to be transformed, and then when you think about his abilities, when you think about him in context with all these other characters, it's not so different from a Yoruichi, a Nemu, a Komomura. So if you're the biggest Grimmjow fan in the world, you're going to be wanting to, you know, make sure you don't blow the bag on Gin week 1. You might want to wait until week 3, you know what I mean, to decide who you pull on. And that is going to be something that's difficult for some people. That's going to be something that is sort of unfair for some people. But if you want to play as free to play as possible, you don't want to risk getting hammered or like missing out on a character. Maybe you prioritize dupes. I will say, as me, someone who does not prioritize dupes at all, I have a much nicer time just being like, I'll just like pull my one copy, maybe get weapon, and then I'll move on with my life. Some people, they really want dupes. They really want their, you know, Komomura to be as strong as possible, their Bankai Ichigo, etc., etc. For them, that's fine, but I would say that's a very anti-free-to-play sort of synergy. But again, if you're like the guy on Twitter, or the girl on Twitter, I don't know, the person on Twitter who loves Soifun, you might be still saving because you just want to max dupe everything Soifun the moment she drops, and that's also respectable. But these are decisions you have to make. Because they're doing that, they're not pulling for Toshido and Aizen and Bankai Ichigo and blah 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 blah, right? Those are decisions you have to make, you know. So Grimmjow, I would definitely see being a character who would fit right in. Obviously, Soifun could come next. Soifun is a character who would make a ton of sense in this slot. Mayuri is also another character sort of filling in for Nemu here, or being a replacement in the ilk of Aizen for the tactics role would be very powerful. I don't remember the leak sheet, but I do think he was listed as a support. Like I said, it's not the greatest position to be in, that we mostly just have Nemu here for, you know, the higher up teams. Otherwise, we have to use Yudahara. And when we're talking about using Yudahara, well, then we're not using Yudahara over here, and then we're missing a, we got the Yudahara vacuum, we got to use this, and we got to use that, and, you know, so on and so forth, right? So that is also a big thing. They could drop Mayuri. Another thing I want to talk about, though, if we sort of go in with that in mind, since we've mentioned Kenpachi, we've mentioned Grimmjow, we've mentioned Soifun, which I think are the most hype of those two. Maybe you could say Nell is also in that vein. It could be Nell, and we could talk about replacing a character like Bankai Ichigo. Consider this Bankai Ichigo. It would be fine, but I would say Grimmjow and Kenpachi are probably the big ones. One of them being a strike character that we know of, and one of them being a spirit character that we know of, but could easily be Slash, could be blah blah blah. It's whatever they want to do ultimately. Let's talk about these gacha games though, right? Let's get into a talk about why it's more likely to be Grimmjow or Kenpachi or Nell. You know, Nell is popular. Why it's more likely to be them, and with that in mind, even if you want Gin, but you're maybe on the fence, maybe you should, you know, just wait a few weeks, sort of suss out how the event is going, right? Does that make sense? So for this, I'm going to be borrowing a term from The Truth, who is a Dokkan creator. If you don't know, and you're sort of you know, you're new to Dokkan, this is a Dokkan database. This is the release of every card in a row. Dokkan uses 2-week cycles. 2-week cycles, right? So a few weeks ago, about a month ago, we got this character. This character came out in actually it was quite a bit ago. It was like 4 weeks ago. It doesn't really matter when they came out. All I'm going to say is we got this character super hype, a Frieza and a Gogeta, right? That went into a Broly. If you know anything about Dragon Ball, those are big names. You know, even if you don't watch Dragon Ball, you know Gogeta, Broly, and Frieza. You just have that in your head. After that, we went into Baby. Now this is GT. Some of you who are young enough might not have even know what GT is, but this is Baby from GT. So a really hype character that almost everyone knows about in Frieza and Gogeta and Broly, right into a lull of Baby. And if you're a Dragon Ball fan, you might be like, Baby is my favorite character ever. I love Baby. You know, if you're a huge GT fan, but by and large, that's not the case. His part 2 was this Goten and Gohan possessed. Pretty cool character. If you're a fan of GT, this is a unique character, but not exactly hype. This isn't hype. Right after that, though, we went into Daima, the literal newest thing that has come out of Dragon Ball, period. And again, to steal the term then steal the phrase from The Truth, this is sort of the gacha peaks and valleys. They're not just going to release Aizen, then release Okieta, then release I don't know, Yamamoto, then release Shunsui, then release, you know, Yukitake, and blah, 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 and then Stark's gonna come out. They're going to have to balance hype with sort of unhype. This creates the sort of wave of saving, and, you know, it gets characters in who might not be as popular, and we can sort of start talking about filling out teams with characters like Mayuri, Mayuri's cool. I really liked him, especially as a kid. I was like, this is a sick character, you know, scientist who, you know, he's a sadist, and he does all this cool stuff, and he always seems like one step ahead. He's cool. But he's not exactly the hypest looking character. Would any of you pick Mayuri over like a Quincy from TYBW? No, you wouldn't. Not right now, right? Not right now. Not this version of him. You would be like, yeah, give me the TYBW character, right? So peaks and valleys. Right after this Daima Goku, and then we got the Goma, which is his part 2. We went into, again, kind of slid back down. We went into an Android 16 again. If you're not a Dragon Ball fan, you might literally not know who this is. Genuinely. You might know who these two characters are. If you're a part of a certain lifestyle, you know, you like, you know, hitting that thing, you might know who she is, but you probably don't know who 16 is if you're not a Dragon Ball fan, right? If you literally just don't care about the series. And right after this release, which most people consider unhype, to bait, they sort of went into a particularly hype character. But again, a 2-week window into a really hyped character, and then New Year's big celebration, you know, right before the anniversary, baiting to get people to spend stones so that they have to purchase stones for the anniversary is a hyped character. Again, this is when we can start looking at like, okay, well, maybe they're gonna drop Grimmjow, then they're gonna drop Ulquiera, then they're gonna drop anniversary. Ooh, you know what I mean? That's a talking point, right? You need to be aware of that. But we can predict that because we know when the 6-month anniversary is. We know when the anniversary is going to be, right? We'll sort of figure out, are they going to do Golden Week? Are they going to do a Chinese New Year? Blah, blah, blah. We'll figure that out as it comes. But for now, we know that this isn't really anything, right? We're going to get Gin, and then 3 weeks later, they have to come up with something. So peaks and valleys. All this to say is that I don't think we'll be... I do think that after Gin, we'll be seeing another big character. So if you want to hedge your bets and you have Ikkaku and you don't have much content that you need to clear with him, like, sure, your rankings are going to take a hit, but like, you know, this is where I'm sort of stuck at. I think I can get past this. I might have trouble here or here if I'm not using Gin, if I don't pull for him. But 13 with the SSRs is about where I think I peter out. Like, Yoruichi has got me here, and now it's getting a little harder. I might need to run back in here with Aizen and Yorahara as my supports. I think the support package for Strike just isn't good enough, especially if you don't have Komomura's weapon and stamp. And same thing here. I just don't have an SSR. I don't want to spend more on, you know, Shikai Ichigo. It's just, there's too many things I could build that aren't Shikai Ichigo, and there's not a ton of reason for me to rush this. So that is the way you should be thinking about it. I think, personally, do what you want. Ultimately, the game does have rollover pity, so if you want to spend Jade on every single thing, every single time, you know, maximize every single thing. I mean, again, we almost made 10,000 Jade, or at least I almost made 10,000 Jade back from just playing the game every day. You know what I mean? So, yeah. With all that being said, though, like if you like the video, subscribe to the club, we'll go make it, and peace out.